Violence in Namibia has sparked an online-driven activism. Let's take a look.
Become rampant in Namibia. Over the past 3 years, over 3,000 rape cases were reported to the Namibian police. 2020, Rejoice Shovaleka was murdered while walking home, joining the list of women murdered in Namibia. The online platforms Twitter and TikTok, movements like #MeToo have emerged over the years, prompting a new wave of clicktivists who are using the digital media to demand justice. Last week, protesters in various parts of the country took to the streets to demonstrate against sexual and gender-based violence. In Windhoek, the group was made up of young people whose sole aim was to shut down Windhoek in the hope that their demands will be met. Ons is moeg, meaning we are tired, and #ShutItAllDown became trending topics on Twitter and TikTok, drawing international support from various activists across the continent.
We're now joined via Skype by Bertha Tobias, an international relations and economics student, as well as a youth thought leader and speaker, and one of the driving forces behind the #ShutItAllDown movement. Bertha, a very good day to you, and thank you so much for making the time out to speak to us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ndishishi.
Firstly, how did the #ShutItAllDown Namibia movement start?
So I believe the hashtag was inspired by the headline about the human remains that were found in the coastal region, which were suspected to be those of Shannon Wasserfall. I think that sparked once again a nationwide conversation about sexual and gender-based violence, as well as femicide. And then young people mobilized, they brought resources together, and there was a protest within a matter of a few hours. So I think there was already pre-existing frustration, because even before even before Shannon Wasserfall went missing, we continued to see headlines of women being killed, by their boyfriends, fathers, husbands, whoever. So I think there was already a pre-existing frustration, and the organization and mobilization of #ShutItAllDown sort of just solidified that frustration, and it validated it and gave it a space to sort of simmer and trickle out. So I think that is the onset of #ShutItAllDown.
Indeed. Bertha, this movement was birthed on social media, Twitter to be specific. Just speak to us about how Twitter has been, the usefulness of Twitter in terms of a platform in advocating for the rights of women in the country.
Right. I think Twitter is very crucial. I think very instrumental. Not just Twitter, social media and digital platforms as a whole, I think have become crucial in catalyzing mobilization of people. If anything, I'd argue that currently it's the most effective tool that we have to spread information. And particularly on Twitter, there's, you start to feel a sense of community, you start to feel a sense of unity as well. And I think it's that communion that spurs people to action and that pushes them to contribute to and subscribe to anything that is born on the Twitter timeline. So I think Twitter is crucial, not just in terms of having mobilized these protests, but to answer the wider part of your question, which is just advocating for the rights of women in general. I think Twitter is also a very meaningful and probably the most crucial birthplace for important conversations about perceptions of women's bodies, the commodification of women, how women are treated. And it's a space for all of us to learn and unlearn, because it's a space where you can learn without feeling directly attacked. I mean, most times you are, but it's that constant exchange of ideas that I think makes Twitter effective in mobilizing as well as in facilitating general dialogue.
Yeah. Was this the type of support you anticipated when you set out on this journey?
Excuse me?
Was this the type of support you anticipated when you set out on this journey?
Sorry, are you asking whether this was a platform?
Looking at the use of Twitter, of course, as a means of mobilizing the people, was this the type of support you anticipated? Looking at the number of protesters on the streets today.
Well, no, definitely not. I think young people who are angry about #ShutItAllDown I don't think anybody expected that a movement would develop organically and would really take on a life of its own. And, it's grown to be so big that I think lots of people are taking ownership over it. And that is definitely not the kind of platform or the kind of magnitude that I think anybody expected.
Yeah.
But I think the growth that it has experienced and just the exponentiality of that growth just goes to say how angry we genuinely all truly were even before hashtag shut it all down.
Yeah.
But no, this was definitely, these are not heights that I think young people expected to reach in advocating for against LGBT and femicide in Namibia.
Yeah. Bertha, as a final comment from you today, just how do you think, not only the hashtag Shut It All Down movement, but in general, how do you think this has shaped and will continue to shape, protests and demonstrations of any sorts in the country?
Right. So I think what this has done is it has reaffirmed the importance and the value of, holding systems and structures accountable to work that they're tasked with. So whether that's the government, whether that's NGOs, whether that's other stakeholders who have been tasked with, curbing LGBT and femicide in the country. I think what this demonstration has done is it has proven that young people, one, care, and two, that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and take to the streets if they had to. And I think a beautiful illustration of that was when protesters gathered outside the magistrate's court to stand in solidarity with the 25 protesters who were detained on Saturday. I think if there's anything that these demonstrations have done, in addition, obviously, to not just sparking conversation, but in addition to accelerating the national response to HPV, it has definitely, just within the wider scope of political theory, it has reaffirmed the fact that power dynamics are probably being redesigned. The fact that, the birthplaces of movements and the birthplaces of political activities are being redesigned or they're being complicated by other platforms like Twitter. And it's also reaffirmed the fact that young people do believe in their voices and they believe in the power of their voices and that they believe in holding systems and structures of governance accountable.
Very much indeed. Bertha, thank you so much for making the time out to speak to us today.
Right. Thank you so much for having me, Ndishishi.
There you have it, Bertha Tobias, who is a youth thought leader, speaker and activist, talking to us today about the hashtag Shut It All Down movement. Of course, saying that social media has played a crucial part in mobilizing youth who are advocating against, that is, sexual and gender-based violence. You, of course, can also form part of the conversation. That is, go to hashtag Shut It All Down Namibia